let's start this off with something we all know, but hasn't been said enough. Animation can be weird! I mean, has it ever happened to you that you watch some cute cartoon where the characters go on a little adventure, and then suddenly... Yeah, that happens. But of course, in the world of animation, there are no rules and anything can be possible. Yet very few movies actually take advantage of that fact. There is a reason though. Since cartoons are famous for being wacky and over the top, giving them limitless control can result in something chaotic. However, while some do have to be contained, there are those whose surrealistic mannerisms and complete disregard to common logic and sense might actually be fun. And that's exactly what this entire list is all about, to dedicate the psychedelic and, of course, the completely weird. Now for this top 10, I like to remind you about 3 things about the movies that you're about to see here. Number 1, there are no Japanese films, because that would be cheating. Number 2, I made sure the movies in here are good, and despite their oddity, they are all worth your time. But I may get into some spoilers to some, so I'm just warning you now. And number 3, this is not ranked by the best, but rather by the weirdness. Even if some are considered the greatest of all time, it can only be higher on the list depending on how bizarre it can be. So, with all that established, it is time to say goodbye to everything we know and literally shatter our reality as we enter in the forbidden world of animation. And yes, I do mean literally. I'm Animat, and welcome to the top 10 weirdest animated films. Now, let's begin with something familiar to help ease you into the madness. Maybe giving you a movie you might recognize as an appetizer will give you a clue of what to expect in a world where everything is unexpected. And what could be more recognizable than some classic Disney? Starting this list at number 10 is the Three Caballeros. As it is a Disney movie from the 1940s after Bambi, this is one of Walt's package films that doesn't necessarily have a linear narrative. In this case, the most you get as a consistent plot throughout is that the movie is set during Donald Duck's birthday, and he opens up 3 presents that he received from what is said to be his friends from Latin America. The first present starts out fine with a couple of cartoons where a penguin goes to the Galapagos Islands and the story of an Argentinian boy and his bond with a flying donkey. The only piece of crazy you get from this is when the Araquan bird shows up and goes Then the second gives you a taste of what's to come when Donald's Saludos Amigos buddy, Jose Carioca, transports him into a pop-up book to bring him to Bahia, where they both dance the samba with live actors. Admittedly, the reason why it's low on the list is because it does take time before it actually gets to the weird part. Don't get me wrong, it is a fun and great movie altogether, but if you want to watch this for the madness, then you'd have to wait until Donald opens up his third present, where he does a hilarious bit of trying to grow back to normal size, and then... This is where the real source of the feature's weirdness comes in. Right when Panchito enters the scene, he turns the whole thing into a nonsensical fiesta. Granted, he does teach the boys about the origins of the piñata and gives them a tour of Mexico, But that's when Donald's libido gets the best of him, where he asks, "Who is Daisy Duck?" and spends an entire scene chasing live-action girls. And considering what I've learned about real ducks when they get horny, I don't know if this part is either comical or terrifying because, I'm just saying. In fact, Donald gets so excited that he penetrates reality and unloads a chaotic 10-minute finale, where his love for Dora Luz and Carmen Molina turns into a fever dream that Jose and Panchito sometimes messes around in.
We're three caballeros, they say we are birds of a feather.
Yes, it does take a while for the movie to get weird, but when it finally gets there, it makes the wait worth it to give Donald the craziest birthday that no one will ever forget. Y recién estoy comenzando. While some would travel to far-off distances to find the strangest locations on Earth, the weirdest place in the world is actually the most common that literally anyone can access: the human mind. Of course, every mind is completely different than the next with their own sense of logic and rules, which is why one would go insane if they end up stuck in another person's mind because they have no control. However, what if the person themselves have no control of their own mind? What if we look into the mind of someone whose brain is deteriorating and, for the lack of a better term, is losing their mind? That is where we are heading at number 9, in a little movie called It's Such a Beautiful Day. In my opinion, Don Hertzfeldt is not an animator, but rather a contemporary artist who uses animation as his medium. He's like if Banksy decided to make cartoons. Not everyone may immediately recognize the name, but you're most likely familiar with some of his works that presents his own brand of random comedy.
My spoon is too big. I am a banana!
In the case of It's Such a Beautiful Day, he combines 3 of his animated shorts into one feature-length story about a man named Bill. At first, you'd think Bill was living an ordinary life with a few quirks, but then it's revealed that he's suffering from a disease that's gradually eating up his brain, and it becomes inevitable that, whatever it is, it's going to end his life. While it is praised for its in-depth perspective on mental illness and how that can progressively corrupt someone's everyday life, the true weirdness of the feature comes from the signature style of Don Hertzfeldt. His animation may first seem very simple enough to the point of mostly being in black and white and using stick figures, but that's only to set the ordinary standard so low that whenever it goes out of the ordinary, it only emphasizes its strangeness even further. Kind of like if Don deliberately simplified his style just to have more room to highlight whatever crazy idea he may unexpectedly let out.
Outside, horribly deformed birds checked their voicemail.
I am made nervous by a clone that grows beneath my closet.
Not as complicated.
Another of his signature trait that boldens the film's bizarre nature is the deadpan narration. No matter what happens or how serious Bill's condition can be, Hertzfeldt mostly goes through it all as if everything's normal in that consistent monotone voice. He never takes the time to question anything, rather it be a wild hallucination, a weird backstory for Bill's family, or mentioning a useless fact. He just keeps on going while leaving your emotions confused.
Today she's joined by her boyfriend, a young man named Steve, who spends most of the afternoon in the corner, quietly staring at Matthew's curtain.
I am in pain.
Honestly, I don't know if I'm laughing because it's funny or it's because I have no clue how to respond to this and just go with laughter to not make it any more awkward. But even with his uncomfortably deadpan style of narration and his deceivingly simple animation, It only adds into the weirdness of the feature to show that the human mind only seems comprehensible when it's actually anything but. Especially when it's out of control and can turn a beautiful day into one that others will never forget. The funny thing about nonsense is that it not only takes away common and logical sense, but it also messes with your own senses. When you see something that doesn't seem to make sense, that's when you start to have a lot of doubt. You don't know if the problem is what you're seeing, or if the problem is you. But if you don't get it now, the best thing to do is wait. And with enough patience, the pieces will come together and it will all suddenly make sense. That was exactly the experience I had with the number 8 film, Waking Life.
I still feel that way sometimes. Like I'm looking back on my life. Like my waking life is her memories.
Richard Linklater is the kind of filmmaker who is never afraid to experiment with his movies. No matter what the genre is, he's always known to try something new in order to make them stand out from the rest. Whether it be his comedies, his romances, his dramas, and even his family films. Even when he enters the realm of animation, he goes beyond the mainstream norms to tell his stories, like he did in A Scanner Darkly. But when it comes to his first animated venture, he didn't make a straightforward movie, but rather something that wants to be thought-provoking. The best way to describe Waking Life is as if you walk into a philosophy class at a university and you get a moment to talk to each student regarding the meaning of life. This time, however, as they exchange their ideas while also trying to answer the questions of who are we and how much control do we have of ourselves, they also have their own rotoscope style that can allow them to go beyond reality as they talk. And it doesn't really matter who specifically is talking. A wide variety of people get their chance to say their piece, regardless if they're young, they're old, they're scholars, they're free thinkers, they're other filmmakers, they're characters from other Richard Linklater movies, they're perfectly calm, or they're like Alex Jones and act like a raging lunatic.
It's all there to control you, two sides of the same coin. Two management teams bidding for control, the CEO job of Slavery Incorporated.
Okay, scratch that. That guy is not like Alex Jones. He is Alex Jones. Huh. An animated movie featuring Alex Jones. That fact alone is worth putting it on this list. You know, looking back, he seems rather tame compared to nowadays. But I understand that all this life talk and no legitimate narrative can be easily confusing. And for a good while, it is. But once it reaches closer to the end, that's when it all suddenly becomes clear. Oh, and spoiler warning, by the way. Or not, who knows, I could totally be wrong with my interpretation. You see, throughout the film, we follow this guy around who talks to most of these people as they discuss their philosophies. Just like the audience, he tries to understand what is even going on in the first place. But then by the end, when he gets to chat with Linklater himself, it suddenly all makes sense. The main character is dead. He's actually in a dream state where he's just one step away from accepting his own fate. And all these theories about life and what is our purpose ultimately lead to the big outcome of it all. And it really makes sense that this is all a dream because, let's be honest, who the fridge talks to random people like this?
Hey, could we do that again? I know we haven't met, but I don't want to be an ant, you know? Walk here, drive there. All action basically for survival, all communication simply to keep this ant colony buzzing along in an efficient, polite manner.
I'm sorry, have you ever talked to a human before? But even if it's a question no one can truly answer, Waking Life shows us that the meaning of life and the pursuit of the answer can be complicatingly weird.
that actually this is the narrative of everyone's life. That, behind the phenomenal difference, there is but one story. And that's the story of moving from the no to the yes.
The following feature may only be at number 7, but even if it's not that high on the list, it will always be my number 1 favorite film. Next up is another Disney classic, this time being Walt's experimental masterpiece, Fantasia. Originally began as a new and unique way of rebooting the popularity of Mickey Mouse by having him feature in a no-talking and all-music animated adaptation of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, the project grew to become a one-of-a-kind experience unlike any other. Sure, some similar attempts were later made, but this is a true case of often imitated but never duplicated. What makes Fantasia stand out amongst all the other Disney animated features is how music takes importance above all else. So much so that it even throws away the idea of having a feature-length story to present the concept of having known classical music taking control of the animation. With the exception of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, none of the segments actually have a story. Instead, they present visual allegories of time and legends, including the hours of the day, the changing of the seasons, the Earth's beginnings, Greek mythology, and heaven and hell. There is also the Toccata and Fugue opening, which can be said to be the weirdest segment of them all because of how purely abstract it is. What you see is nothing familiar, just what the sound of the music may look like. I know calling this weird might offend some people because this would be more referred to as artistic or avant-garde, but here's an interesting fact about Fantasia. When the movie was first released back in 1940, it was a complete failure. Disney lost millions of dollars on that film, and critics didn't like it all that much. For a good while, it was considered one of Walt's low points in his career. But you might be wondering, if this started out as a box office bomb and critically mixed, how did it end up getting its status as an animated masterpiece? Well, the praise amongst the mainstream didn't fully happen until a few decades later, when the movie earned a newfound appreciation thanks to the young generation getting high. Yes, when the hippie generation was in full swing, Fantasia gained a lot more attention because of its already established psychedelic nature. Even with all the artistic symbolisms it may have, it still doesn't change how trippy some moments can be. You're still watching dancing mushrooms, a hippo and an alligator doing ballet, Mickey Mouse giving life to brooms, a fish doing a burlesque show, nudity in a Disney cartoon, Disney literally unleashing hell, and whatever the fridge this is. Yes, it is a beautiful film, but it is also undeniably a weird film, especially when its weirdness is what helped the movie get its legendary status in the first place. Classical music and Disney animation is a strange combo, especially when you take traditional storytelling out of the equation. But it's one of the best combinations Disney has ever concocted. Of course, there is no limit to how weird anything can be. You can even take something that exists that already has an established strangeness and find a way to implement more so that it can become even more chaotic. Take Fantasia, for example. How do you take something that's already weird like that and make it even weirder? Simple. You make a parody of it that doesn't take itself seriously. And that's exactly what number 6 did in Allegro Non Troppo.
A 1, a 2, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4.
When Italian animator Bruno Bozzetto wanted to try his take on Walt Disney's ambitious experiment, he took the familiar concept and went a little wilder with his own segments that results in both a satire and an homage to the 1940 classic. There are a few that are a bit more serious, but they mostly go in the comedy angle with a little dash of clever commentary, mostly about how the world is corrupted by human industrialism and capitalism. And as it already established itself as a wackier Fantasia, the movie delivers a finale with just about everything it could think of. It couldn't really decide on a good ending, so it just threw everything at its disposal and capped it off with blowing the whole world up. But the funny thing about this movie is that you'd think that it's on this list for going crazier with its animated segments than Fantasia did. Technically, yes, but in this case, that's not the true source of the weirdness. In fact, the tone of the animation is relatively tame compared to what's going on during the live-action parts in between.
Sostengono che questo film, cosa assurda, l'avrebbe già fatto parecchi anni fa, un certo Grisney, un americano, insomma.
Unlike Fantasia, Allegro Non Troppo has a bit of a narrative during the live-action scenes, and the amount of silliness they carry is almost like something out of Monty Python, where the host presents his own musical show with an orchestra of old ladies and a sole animator who draws the entire scenes as the music play.
Trovare l'autore ideale dei nostri disegni animati non è stata un'impresa da poco. Occorreva quindi legarlo a noi con un contratto chiaro, basato sulla fiducia e sulla stima reciproca.
Yeah, it looks pretty rough, but hey, could be worse. At least he's not working in the anime industry in Japan. Case in point, the animator was able to get some time to sleep.
Forza, sei stato legato 5 anni, non puoi essere stanco. Bravo, così va bene, eh?
And that's just to establish what's going on. This is not to mention the craziness that happens during each scene, with the animator's cartoons literally brought to life out of the pages. He and some woman make sweet music in a piano. Oh, and a gorilla came out of nowhere to chase these people around. It's one thing to not know what to expect how the movie will combine classical music with animation after each segment, but it adds an extra layer of madness where you never know what surprises will suddenly appear after every minute. It just goes to show that if there's one thing weirder than weird, it's a parody of weird. Considering that they have been attached to our culture since the dawn of humanity, it's easy to forget how folktales can be very weird. Especially nowadays, when most of the popular tales have been sanitized by major corporations like Disney, it only makes the original versions even more strange by comparison with how violent and nasty they can get. The number 5 film on our list is a throwback to those classic folktales, staying true to their timelessness, fantastical and heroic themes, and of course, all of their oddities and quirks. This is Son of the White Mare. Inspired by the Hungarian poem of the same name, Son of the White Mare has everything you need to create a classic fairy tale that everyone can recognize. It has a hero who gains amazing powers, a couple of allies who help him along the way, some creatures and obstacles that may try to block his path, and a princess who is locked up in a castle that is guarded by an evil dragon. Actually, the hero is so good at rescuing the latter that he does it 3 times in a row. It has all the traditional traits of a familiar fairy tale, but still has enough materials to make it stand out on its own and to develop a unique story that can be engaging and creative, even if some of the creativity can be, questionable.
Ejne, édes fiam, most már nagy vagy. Nagyon fáj a hátam. De azért lesz. Mégis.
So, just to give you the whole context, the super strength of the hero, named Tree Shaker, comes from continuously being breastfed by his own mother until he is a grown man. And his mother is a talking horse. You know, the more shocked and confused you are by that, the more it shows how unfamiliar you are with how folktales can actually be. But may I add that while the story itself has a good amount of extraordinary concepts to keep itself interesting as a folktale, what makes Son of the White Mare stand out as an animated feature is the way that it presents the poem. Yes, cartoons telling fairy tales is a tale as old as time. But this, however, is another story. The one element this movie has over any other animated film is the signature visual style of director Marcel Jankovic, where he replaced traditional black outlines with vibrant colors that is being used to their full effect. The result is a psychedelic look that plays so much with not just the colors, but also with shapes and symbolisms, which turned the typical fantasy setting into a strange and unfamiliar world unlike any other. Speaking of symbolisms, that's also something this movie does often. A lot of what they present are more metaphorical than being exactly what they mean. Sometimes the metaphors can be, pretty clear, and others present a more abstract definition. Like the dragons Tree Shaker has to face are actually just humanoid monsters with multiple heads and their own modern theme. In fact, almost nothing about them looks like an actual dragon. Well, except for this one, I guess. At least he has a tail. Wait a minute, that's not his tail! But by combining a classic folk tale with surrealistic animation, Son of the White Mare continues the tradition of keeping these stories inspiring, creative, and just all around weird. Hey! Over here! Ah, there you go, you found me. Now, I know I'm not the first to make a list about weird movies or weird cartoons, but when you research a specific list and see what others may rank in theirs, you'll often notice that they have a pattern, and that there is always that one or even a few that always show up in that type of list without fail. And when it comes to weird films, especially weird animated films, no list about the subject would be complete without what is taking the number 4 spot here, Fantastic Planet. Ever wonder what would happen if the human race is not the dominant species of this planet? What if, instead of us, there would be these other beings that are both bigger and smarter that took our place? That is exactly what is happening in the planet Egam, where humans are just bug-sized pets or vermins to the giant blue aliens called the Trags. In this film, it is all about survival, where one rogue human who gained advanced knowledge through a Trag device escaped from his owner and discovers a hidden human civilization. While many film enthusiasts debate that this is an allegory on either animal rights or human rights, Fantastic Planet is the kind of film that indulges in its world building. One that is both its most memorable component and the reason why it is actually on the list. Probably more than its allegory, the movie succeeds in developing an entire alien planet with its own type of nature, wildlife, and civilization. A good reason is how it put in so much effort to make it completely different than anything we'd find on Earth. The creatures are already bizarre enough with the way they function and how they eat, but there is also that extra layer of surrealism that is emphasized by its use of stop-motion cutout animation. And if you think that's weird, then take a look at the dominant species. At first, there seem to be some strong parallels between us and the Trags. They're big blue people before James Cameron made it a thing. They value knowledge, they have advanced technology to help improve their way of living, and self-care is an important part of their lives where they take daily meditations. Okay, to be fair, everyone has their own way of meditating. Some listen to music, some do yoga. The Trags prefer to turn their bodies into a lava lamp. Come on, don't knock it until you try it. But regardless of their lifestyle or their controversial viewpoint on humans, the one thing that remains the same both on Earth and on EGAM is the matter of life and death. It just so happens that this fantastic planet has a rather special way of doing it. Coming in at number 3 on our list is the most iconic piece of weirdness in pop culture history. With all the film adaptations that were made of this special story, it was inevitable that at least one of them would find itself here. So with that said, let's talk about Alice in Wonderland. There are very few works of literature that are as renowned and beloved as the Lewis Carroll novels Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Ever since the invention of film, there have been countless of adaptations of the story about the little girl who fell down the rabbit hole and found herself in the fantastical world of Wonderland. While many have put their own spin on the timeless tale, none could ever be more popular than the 1951 animated feature by Walt Disney, which turned Carroll's pages into a colorful display of creativity and unforgettable characters that is still cherished by millions across several generations. But we're not going to talk about that one, so let's instead take a look at the real number 3, the 1988 Czech stop-motion live-action hybrid, Alice. Of course, this is not the first time that Alice steps into the world of animation. In fact, this is not even the first Alice movie that's part live-action and part stop-motion. But the key difference here compared to all the other Alice adaptations is... the characters are all sleep paralysis demons. Here we go. Allow me to explain. This is the first movie developed by animator Jan Svankmajer, who is not only the darkest filmmaker on this list, but he is also one of the most influential. In fact, some of the most acclaimed auteurs, animators, and filmmakers today credit Svankmajer as a major influence. On top of being a very experimental animator, he also has a specialty to use ordinary household objects to create surrealistically nightmarish worlds. In the case of Alice, he took a bunch of toys you'd commonly find in a child's playroom and some materials for taxidermy in order to create his twisted version of Wonderland, where the familiar suddenly becomes uncomfortably creepy, including the caterpillar being just a sock with eyes and teeth. Alice becomes a little doll when she shrinks. The Mad Hatter and the March Hare are a marionette and a wind-up toy respectively, and the White Rabbit...
Tak pozdě. Zanaříkal bílý králík. Halo, pane!
That was tougher than I thought. Just thought I'd let you know, this White Rabbit here likes to eat his own innards that are made of sawdust and enjoys decapitating people with a giant pair of scissors. Just wondering, do you know how to sleep with at least one eye open? But the true reason why this adaptation is on this list instead of any of the others is how familiar Wonderland has become. Everyone knows the story and the characters by now, so most versions feel the same in the way that they all share that colorful look and fantasy-like tone, resulting in the weirdness of Wonderland to become worn out. With Svankmajer's version, he gave Wonderland something new, something that was never done in any other adaptation that not only made his Wonderland an unsettling place to go through, but to make the world's weirdness feel fresh and original again, which leads to the audience feel like they're visiting it for the first time. There had never been a Wonderland quite like this, and there possibly never will be, making 1988's Alice not only one of the scariest, but the weirdest adventure in Wonderland.
Zase se opozdil. Asi mu srazím hlavu. pomyslela si Alenka.
Amongst all the movies on this list, this is the definitive weird animated feature. It is a movie that not only defined the psychedelic art style and gave it popularity in the mainstream, but it is also considered a landmark in many ways, including for animation history, film history, hippie history, music history, and especially Beatles history. Coming in at number 2 is Yellow Submarine. At the end of 1965, during the height of Beatles mania, the public noticed a massive change to the beloved band with the release of their latest album, Rubber Soul. It was clear that they were no longer the lovey-dovey boy band they once were, and began a new era in their career, which their music became a lot more experimental by translating the feeling of hallucinogenics into their songs. The result was possibly the most memorable moment in the band's history, as they released some of the most acclaimed albums of all time, like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Magical Mystery Tour. So, when it was time to make their third feature film, the animators, led by director George Dunning, wanted to visually translate the effect of those songs onto animation. As it is a movie about the Beatles, the songs take top priority, even more so than the story. But the catch here is that, on top of new songs for the film, like It's All Too Much and Hey Bulldog, the soundtrack consists of many of their most psychedelic hits from Sgt. Pepper, Revolver, and Rubber Soul. And as they're responsible for carrying the flow of the narrative and the overall tone, the movie also serves as a collection of animated music videos, which highlights this signature style that is bursting with colors and abstract imagery.
Lucy in the sky with diamonds. The world is at your command. Lonely people, where do they all belong? Sgt. Pepper's lonely, Sgt. Pepper's lonely, Sgt. Pepper's lonely hearts club band. All you need is love is all you need.
It's safe to say that the weirdness of those songs also found their way onto the picture, and, in a way, was able to enhance that weirdness by showing you some hallucinogenic imagery. But this is still a movie after all, so in between those songs, there has to be a story that connects them all together. And yes, there is one here too. And they make the songs look relatively tame by comparison. If there is one thing that can outshine the beloved songs, it's the crazy world of Pepperland, where the evil blue meanies stopped the music and drained all the color out of the land. When Fred managed to escape on his yellow submarine, he calls on the help of the Beatles to bring them to Pepperland to stop the blue meanies and restore both the Paradise's music and peace. In order to match the tone of the music, everything that surrounds the Beatles has to also feel like an entire fever dream, complete with its own logic and physics, a unique set of creatures, and out-of-this-world locations. And there is no such thing as a place that is not weird. Even the movie's Liverpool can't help but be surrealistically wacky.
Just park it here.
I'll just park it here.
Hey, Ringo, I've just had the strangest dream.
I'm sorry, John, but define having the strangest dream. Because by this movie's standards, it's virtually impossible to find something that doesn't come from a strange dream. Especially when you say that right after you turn back to normal from waking up as Frankenstein's monster.
I warned you not to eat on an empty stomach.
With all the craziness and imaginative surrealism that fills every frame of the picture, this is one of those films that newcomers would ask, what were they thinking when they made this? But in the case of Yellow Submarine, it's all in the mind, you know?
It's too much.
This is it, everyone. The grand finale. The one that triumphed over the rest at the top of the list. Now, before I say what the number one on this list is, I figure we take a break from all the weirdness and have a moment to just relax, take a deep breath from all the excitement, and have a little chat. Now, I'll be honest, making a list like this that isn't either directly about the best or the worst is not easy. Not only I had to do plenty of research to find and watch a whole bunch of movies, both mainstream and obscure, but building this list itself required several revisions and constantly switching around movies before finally feeling satisfied with every single choice in each of their position. Of course, there are several features that have a good amount of craziness that would have been great additions to this list. But because I can only fit in 10, I had to make some tough sacrifices. I guess you could count them as honorable mentions, but the ones that almost made it include Boy in the World, The Point, Raggedy Ann and Andy, A Musical Adventure, Twice Upon a Time, A Town Called Panic. Now that one was hilarious. I really liked that one. But maybe I'm just holding on to the suspense here. I'm sure you're all eager to know what is at number one. The weirdest animated feature that is even weirder than Yellow Submarine. Are you ready? The number one weirdest animated film is The Cosmic Eye. Some movies can be strange, some movies can be surreal, and some movies can be quite trippy. The Cosmic Eye, however, is on a whole different level, far more advanced than any other feature. One whose weirdness goes beyond the realms of imagination. Created by John and Faith Hubley, known for creating some of the first cartoons for Sesame Street, it was a passion project for the duo and one that Faith was determined to bring to life after John passed away in 1977, which the film was finally complete 9 years later. The result is a movie that can be best described as out of this world. And by that, I mean that it feels like something that was made on another planet to teach aliens about Earth. This is because the movie talks about the history of humanity, how they are connected with nature, their beliefs, their origins, their culture, their art, how they created civilization, and how they take care of one another. All presented with a wide variety of different styles to reflect the diversity of the world. However, as much as it presents the good side of humanity, it also highlights a lot of its flaws and problems that can end up destroying each other, including war, pollution, nationalistic segregation, colonization, and hate. Overall, this is the Hubley's message for world peace. But like I said before, what makes this the weirdest animated film is how it feels like it's not made for anyone on Earth. With the animation presenting all the abstract imagery with the main characters who are observing humanity and all the different cultures of the world, this is like an instructional guide for aliens about humans on Earth and how to make peace with them. With all the other movies on this list, I can see how they are made by someone from this planet for an audience like us. But The Cosmic Eye feels so otherworldly and so unnaturally abstract that it gives the feeling that it came from a completely different realm or another plane of existence that is far beyond our comprehension. And while the message of peace is meant for us, the experience of watching it is truly unlike any other film with the way it feels like it's meant for aliens. And that is what makes The Cosmic Eye the weirdest animated film. And the weirdest part of all this is that I had no idea what was going on throughout this entire top 10!
It's all all in the mind, you know.